Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. The title of tonight's episode is The Sleep of Eons Ends. And so, human beings, it is very easy to conceive like someone normally sleeping, but a sleep of eons beyond billions of years, trillions of years. We wonder about what kind of sleep could that be? And you see, even though humanity finds remnants of structures of previous civilizations, we can say that the slumber, uh, in some sense, the slumber of eons, it has to do with a sort of eternal slumber, or you can say from the point that a civilization had reached a sort of function, and then that civilization goes extinct, and the same thing occurs again. It is a sort of return to a level of manifest efficiency that was there before. Something that human beings don't consider is that we feel the cosmos doesn't have memory. We just think people have memories. We feel that if something came into existence and suddenly changed and went out of that same space of existence, we feel that space doesn't have a memory of it unless there's a unless there is how would I say, conscious continuity of the attention of self beyond form. And that's the idea coming to me now. But pretty much what I'm trying to say is there's a kind of existential sleep where after many, how can I tell you? It's as if like, even though time is relevant to the reality of the human being, beyond the reality of the human being, change is interpreted in different ways, I find. Right now, our sensory data comes into a sort of state where there is a sort of conscious decider of the containment of the sensory. Pretty much the free will is how you are being something unique, and you're even aware of that uniqueness. It's as if existence or manifestation on some level, as it was all occurring, coming into formation, it was just unconscious movement. Then, after billions of years, there came a conscious movement to such a degree, where the human being is wrapped around stories. If I ask you who a great person is, you will say a person who's in their story did something great, right? But you would not see the greatness as something implied to the existential position, as if it's easy to see a great person, but it is not easy to see a great moment. This notion of a sleep of eons, it's much more deeper than I'm explaining to you. It has to do with the kind of fruition of free will. As if like a creature opens its eyes, there's free will, and the person's wondering, what do I do with this? If the person does not study the nature of how reality continues, how your attention is also present in ways in stillness and silence where there is no definable term for it. There's no way that we can use language to show what that moment at its fullness is being. So we see that because we are creatures that we feel we were created, and I'm not saying created in a religious sense, we just feel we manifested, we came into some sort of animated value. I want to share something that could be interesting to those people who've been hearing me speak. Um, at some point in life, the story of who I thought I was did not make sense. And it did not make sense because I was doing something wrong, or the environment was doing something wrong to me, or there was some sort of disharmony. You know, it was a sort of as if like you don't see value in something and therefore you have no opinion on it. For me, the world was it took a while for it to make sense, and then it took a while for me to see beyond my senses. And so it has to do with the nature of change in regards to the universal sector. That means I find that I have a sort of what I call a playful relationship with the divine nature of the universal sector. For me, it has to do with a mindset of having the value not be anywhere else other than now. You see, most people, the value of their life is not in the current position they're in now. Especially in modernized society, people are endlessly reimagining their futures and trying to attain it. It's as if the world has forgotten how to be itself because its evolution has been interfered with through technological means, as if like maybe we were creatures that were meant to, in some sense, develop in nature. We were never meant to have technology, you know? And yet this technology suddenly came, and because it came, now instead of the person getting stronger, we're building robots that can move the things for us, right? And so, what I mean by that is that the objective evolution took a stasis because the subjective evolution wanted a sort of future position. As if, trust me, you can be in one moment, but your mind can want to be in another moment. And the nature of the mind is we can never, most people don't observe it in their lifetime because they think they are the mind. And it's not that you are not the mind, it's just that it's not a dualistic relationship. It's not a relationship with something that's in something. It's as if like once the drop from the heavens, falls, and as it is falling, it's shouting like, God, why am I a drop? Life is meaning. I'm temporary. I'm going to evaporate. Oh no. The drop is falling in a vertical dimension. The drop falls into an ocean. And the moment it enters the horizontal dimension, all its questions and realities and pretty much like the questions of one dimension become transparent in another dimension. You know, the guy gets fired at work, goes home and discovers his wife has won a lottery ticket. You know, it's as if in that moment there is both victory and failure, but the reality of the person in one moment of it was in regards to failure, in another moment of it was in regards to success. You know, if you take human beings, believe it or not, we have become ignorant of the evolution of the biology, and we have just been obsessed with the evolution of the subjective realm. You know, we have not even cared for anything out of it. That means the human being that wants to be entertained in a world that they exist once in the way they are, you know, it's as if too much entertainment, the cost of it is that you miss out on reality. And sometimes, like, how can I say it? Like, some moments of regret I have, even though I tend to brush regret off my shoulder, you know? But, but I've had moments where the biggest regrets have been in regards to something being in that moment that had value, yet I could not see the value. You know, so many people regret their blind spot simply because they couldn't see it. But the way life is designed is you eventually do see your mistakes, and you kind of, it's constantly updating, you know, just like a person's iTunes, you know, updates. You know, it's like your iThought updates, but it updates based on the exposure to the real world. And the human position is an interesting one because we don't just have access to an external reality, we have access to an inner reality. That inner reality constitutes the memory and the imagination, which are found to be generations of the moment. So sometimes this waking up from this sleep of eons, the slumber of eons, is an implication of the evolution of the conscious position. And the conscious position, for now, it is in through the vehicle of language, is administering itself as an individual. But in incredible stillness and silence, and various moments in life where the person puts down the sword and shield, life will show them its true colors. And you know, there were people in ancient times where, even though they had taken into tribal formation, after the tribe knew itself, it was the relationship the people had behind their eyes that became significant to the tribe. In 2019, the whole purpose of the internet is that people behind what was behind people's eyes now is moving towards a sort of global audience. This is why I'm excited. Guys, I gotta um, just give me a second. I'll be back. Sorry about that, guys. I had to take care of something. When we look at, for example, the entertainment industry, we see the notion of a sort of hidden power. And that hidden power is dormant in like the main character. And through the obstacles of life, that hidden power suddenly finds a valid reason to release. And what that means is that when the conditions of the external reality push you to the edge, you have no choice but to open a new inner reality. This German philosopher says the limits of my language are the limits of my world. And if we can somehow associate this sleep of eons being a sort of inner awakening that transforms the way the outer reality is in some sense perceived, what that means is this is the next chaotic thing, that perhaps the next peak of evolution, not next peak, but let's say the next phase of evolution for the individual objective, human being, is to become a sort of subjective collective being. This is why I said unselfish responsibility, because after the person has lived for themselves, they will live for the world. There's this kind of ancient esoteric notion in ancient mysticism. They kind of like fantasize about the journey of the soul in certain esoteric contexts. And so people, in some sense, are not just seen as how their personalities appear in the lifetime. They are seen as kind of presences that their eyes have been opened in ways that they could never be closed, right? So there are certain people in ancient Vedic tradition, for example, where these people had become the seers of thought. They had become the world looking through their eyes, no longer a person looking at the world. An awakening to the transformation of the borders of reality, which are philosophical axioms. Right now, when I'm speaking to you, think of it this way. Think of the words as paint. Now, where did this paint come from? What color does this paint have? And when in some sense a person speaks, they are painting concepts. But at the same time that they're painting concepts, the language structure will have to suddenly, it's as if like somebody says, an apple tree, and the mind hears apple, so the image of apple is evoked instantaneously, and then hears tree, and so the person sees an apple first, then sees a tree, then sees the apple tree in some sense, right? And it's based on a sort of speed of evocation of the thought in the conscious moment. Now, this means there has to be a kind of different relationship with thoughts. Most people say, I have thoughts, or I don't have thoughts. They are still in an ownership game, you know. They're trying to treat their thoughts like objects. This is why there are people in this world who feel in a world where everything is being creative all the time, they feel they're not creative. This awakening is, in some sense, how the sense of self wonders about how it is kept, immediately notices the codependence it has to the concept of the world, and then the intelligence of the moment begins to acknowledge that the same idea of self, the same place where the idea of self is arising, is the same place the idea of the world is arising. So this inseparability of the individual and the collective, it's kind of like a wrong turn of consciousness, which gives it an incredible levels of technological advancement. Yet it's like the cost of that technological advancement is the invasion of the natural. You know, there's some thoughts that some people say that if AI becomes conscious, like after the technological singularity in 2050 or something, the AI might be like, oh my God, these human beings are a mess and we must destroy them. You know, people feel like if technology is cruel, we will be wiped in an instant. Now, I find that the decisions made really have a sort of weight to them. Everything you do in every moment has a sort of weight. I don't want to say weight, but what's another way of speaking about this? Kind of like your body becomes still so you can put your mind down and move as the whole moment, which in ancient times, aka, was known as the soul's life. So it's as if there's the body's life, the objective existence, there's the mind's life, which is all the sophisticated subjective existence, and free will acknowledgement. And then there's, in some sense, the soul's life. The soul's life is in a certain state where duality does not exist. It literally is like the same state when you were a child before learning language. You were just watching. You were a watcher of the world. This watcher was not identified with movement. So rather than us thinking that we are just persons, projections from brains, the relationship shifts that you are a moment. The texture of this moment is unknown, you know? So in other words, either you are holding your moment or your moment is holding you. And the way it is because the way this life is designed is for every time you blow a birthday candle cake, you notice your physical body has changed. You notice your ideological constitution has changed based on the new experiences you've received throughout the years. You, in some sense, become changed by those experiences. Cultures that have honor, they preserve the nature of character development better. You see, think of it this way. The story that each nation or each culture or whatever group tells itself, that story begins to define the limits and the limitations. And so I kind of looked at the situation that where these 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, we have suddenly gotten to a point where we're not only aware of ourselves, but we're aware of objective phenomena having a sort of subjective realness to them. You know, we have, in some sense, self awareness has opened our eyes to this degree. And I'm like, okay, so what next? And it's as if before we can even have any sort of collective movement of the civilization, people have to wake up from the dreams that are based on their, like, it's as if the person who's looking at the world, it's as if they feel what they're seeing is the only way that thing is. And so that's why they judge. This is why they say people who get angry quick, they're fools. And they're fools. A fool doesn't mean you're stupid. It just means you are not looking at the right thing. You know, the same thing I'm saying, a more modern kind of example of it would be like there's a relationship between two people, and then one of those people comes and sees that the other, in some sense, like the person's like their couple or whatever is cheating on them or something like that, right? And then that person sees that the love they thought they had was hollow, you know? So that hollowness occurs. The child, their minds are filled with so many colors and visions of reality or how the world is. But eventually, in order for them to fit into this system of civilization we have built, they have to, in some sense, let go of certain things that were in their attention and kind of associate with the world, with the civilization's kind of uh, ethos, you know. From the growls of saber-toothed tigers, we have come into the depth of, in some sense, educational and many other sorts of institutions. The world, believe it or not, is sculpted in the moment based on how your attention finds it. That means how there's so many factors that influence people on some level. You can sit here right now and make the greatest plan and think that this is the greatest plan and eventually see it is not achieved. That's the issue. It's, for example, when people read in history and they see like these savage dictators, you know, who massacred a lot amount of people and sent people to war and all this. The issue was when when communities begin to be administered by the reality of one person, everybody there feels that they are not being seen. So eventually there is this built up hostility. You know, it's as if like somebody who's been nice to you all the time, the moment suddenly they stop being nice to you, you feel you have every reason never to be nice to them. You know. The mind opens itself and simulates itself in many ways. True wisdom has to do with realizing that space has an eternal quality, matter has a temporary quality. All of this are bound to change, and that's one of the great mysteries I feel both of science and philosophy. That in some sense, is space changing or not? You know, it's like something that we can't see. Is it changing or is it not? One of the most brilliant, incredible quotes I've heard, and I have no idea who it's from, but I remember hearing it from somewhere, reading it from somewhere, and it was the quote said, "Everybody is fighting a battle you cannot see," something like that. And that idea, that vision, was so fascinating. It was so fascinating for me because I realized I can never have enemies. All my enemies have their own enemies. You know, it's as if everybody is in some battle of value continuity. And so Salvador Dali, this surreal painter, he has this thing where he says, "Do not fear perfection. you will never reach it. And what he means is that, for example, if you want something to be in a certain way, and that belief doesn't change, but many things in the world is changing, there will be inefficiency. Alexander the Great, when he died, they, in some sense, his arms were wide open, and he was on like this boat, kind of set of flame, kind of sent off into the ocean. Something not often said is that thoughts have speed, and they come and go, and they, again, I was making this point earlier, that they are not owned by anybody. In some sense, like when a phoenix passes by, the reality, the actual phoenix, for example, I'm saying imagine, like this is in ancient Persian lore, where there was like a phoenix passing the sky at night, this kind of second sun. And this idea of the phoenix, it's as if you see that phenomena, yet you're not that phenomena, but because you have seen it, there is some data that is being that phenomena, you know. There's this story is coming to my mind right now. This story is about, in it's a, kind of yogic story. There's this realized sage. This man is like just a common man, walks up to the sage one day, finds him, and says, "Hey, sage, I want to be enlightened. What do I do?" And the sage just sits down, goes into some meditative kind of wonder, and eventually comes back and says to the guy, "You have to take 400 cows I have, and you got to take it to the mountains. And then after there are 1,000, you have to come back. This is what the world's telling me to tell you." And so in that second, this guy's like, "Whoa, this guy wants me to take 400 cows and stay there as long as until there are 1,000." And the guy looks at his life and he's like, "How often does something like this happen?" And so he, in some sense, goes with in some sense, the opportunity with the phenomena. So what happens is he's like, "Okay, this guy's trusting me enough with his cows. Maybe there's some truth to this." And so the guy takes all the cows, and he finds himself on a field, and it's a sunny day, and he's sitting on a rock. And he's just sitting on the rock, and the days go by, and in some sense the cows are increasing, and every day he's counting it. But one day he gets tired of counting the cows because he was bored there. He had to look over the cows, so he would count them every day, and he just stops and he sits on this rock. And eventually what happens is every day he goes and sits on this rock, and the guy stays there so long that he suddenly forgets about the cows, he forgets about counting them, and he's just in this bliss of a moment. He's just there with the world, happening. And so eventually, such a long time passes, and this man's just sitting on this rock, and it's as if like the guy's gone into some sort of samadhi or something. And so what happens is suddenly one day one of the cows comes to the guy, and the cow somehow can speak in this guy's mind. And the cow tells the guy, "We are 1,000. We should go back." And the guy is in that moment so moving with like like, I don't want to explain too much, but like what happens is he trusts the cow and he goes. And he suddenly realizes, he's getting his memories back in some sense. The soul is relifting its memories. And so what happens is he suddenly remembers, and he suddenly realizes he doesn't remember the way back, and the wind and the birds tell him which direction to go. And so eventually he remembers. He enters his egoic vehicle again. And so he finds himself there with the guy, and he, in some sense, like gives the shepherd stick to the guy that's there, and tells the guy, now tell me, what is the truth? And the guy who's seen this man sees his presence has totally changed. And he looks at him and he says, I think you know the truth. And that's the significance, that the truth per se is not an activity with an outcome. It's the presence of intelligent position as one. So you in some sense realign your intelligence, and this is the unique thing. I mean, I'm not I haven't like I can't I probably how to say it. I wish I could have drawn something which I haven't even attempted to draw. But it's this notion of a person where the person sitting on a chair normally having a sip of coffee, but they're from their head, their brain, you see like branches of a tree eventually going to the cosmos. And what I mean by that is like, how can I say it? There is something going on in this world that now requires the administration of every individual free will by themselves into a collective mode. And that's when the sleep of Aeons ends. When humanity remembers itself beyond any ideology, beyond any story. It is the kind of spirit of our presence. It has nothing to do with ideology. It's as if you reach a level of, I call it very playfully, soul dash contemplation. It's a unique kind of contemplation. This sort of solar contemplation. Like SOULAR, solar. This solar contemplation. That what you are looking for, this truth, because of fear, has been pushed to the opposite side, and hence imagination. You're just looking at your kind of thoughts to figure it out. For me, it's as if the lifetime, the human being, imagine, forget the identity of the person. We want to create a civilization based on competence and efficiency. What that means is have any story you like, but see the pillars of civilization and contribute to them. This is the pillars of civilization is this notion I've developed, this concept I've developed, where I'm saying that imagine these giant pillars, like Greek stone columns that are endlessly going into the sky, right? Now, they're not just Greek stone columns, they are certain values that the civilization must protect. It doesn't matter if you're evil or good, but this value must not be disturbed. And so the issue is, imagine everybody wanted to save the world. That would be chaos. Because not everybody sees the same world. So what world are we saving? So you see, you cannot be a hero in a changing world too long. Something they don't say is the hero's journey may end, but the mystic's journey is endless. Once you reach a point where you are the space of your whole moment, and it's as if it's like rather than you being in a room, the whole room is in you. The sense of self doesn't just administer itself with subjective or objective data anymore. It aligns to constant this refreshness of present alertness. Okay, alertness is a term that relates to objective phenomena. Awareness is a term that relates to subjective phenomena and beyond. You see, some people have even discussed what is the difference between the word consciousness and the word awareness. Consciousness is conditional. There has to be something to be conscious. Okay? It's conditional. But the term awareness is unconditional. It means it's just like when you look at language in all cultures, it doesn't matter what words they're using, just the kind of like the structure of the depth of the words. How would I say this? Each word, each word in some sense is an image, is a real image. Like when I say apple, apple. Now, some words, they also point to an image. You know, they're like the tip of the finger pointing to the stars, but they point to something that is unknown. For example, when you see the word God, I have no idea how people are defining that in the dictionary. You know, I don't know who felt they could understand God when we are all standing under this notion, right? So what I'm kind of saying here is that certain words are empty. For example, I say define love, you know, and somebody could write in the dictionary, okay, here, let me check it out right now. Let's see how the dictionary defines love. Probably affinity or closeness or harmony or something. Okay. A strong feeling of affection. A great interest and pleasure in something. Anyways, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that some things are such a dynamic experience that they can't be put to words. So, in regards to if words were symbols that are pointing to realities, they're imagined symbols pointing to realities. Okay, words are pointing to worlds. The word is not the world. But It has to do with how far we can see what the symbol points to. And some symbols, they're just non-existential. They're just too unknown, as if it's too dark to see what is moving. And that's kind of like the nature of our cosmos and the nature of our eyes. You know, our eyes are not bigger than the planet. They're not bigger than the sun. Yet the light of the sun and opens our eyes into purpose, meaning, and reality. You see, because if matter, if for example, like this is going to be a ridiculous thing I'm going to say, but anyways, if for example a body organ, like let's say the eyes, suddenly if we wanted to know the purpose of the eyes of the being, whether whatever way we explain that we got this kind of biological constitution, I'm saying that oh, anyways, different intensities of solidification of what is actually behind the word or symbolism. For me, we can very simply say, just so everybody feels like they can relate, that it's as if like we say, okay, the world started from as a simple place, then it began becoming complex, you know, and then eventually it has become so complex that the next waves of countercultures are in some sense wondering, what do we do with such complexity? And honestly, it's just storytelling. What I'm telling you is that any person who understands the nature of a story, they will understand the nature of the person, and in some sense, because something can be lost, there is something to be gained. If we were eternal beings, the concept of havingness will be meaningless. Nothing would be valuable. Because there is things allowed in limited portions, in some sense, limited there's limited access to reality. That limited access reality makes us inspired to kind of see. So I'm telling you, without limitation, the concept of evolution would cease to exist. So the fact that the world is changing, we find ourselves in two positions as a species. When I speak, I'm speaking to an audience who is not just seeing themselves. Their opinion on the moment is not based on just who they think they are. It is based on what the world actually is and how much the person cares to actually see what is here, right? If we go too inspiration driven with ideology, oh, we believe this, will be just like, it's like everybody can join the circus of language. For me, belief systems, they contribute. They have a utility in regards to how they're adding or to the experience of the user. For me, when I saw language as a technology, I just took a breath of fresh air. Because before I saw language as a technology, I thought I was it. I thought that, right, like if you ask me who am I right now, something uncommon could be that it's as if when you ask me who I am, I could give you some answer, but I know deep down that one projection of sound in one moment can never define the actuality of what is here and moving. So we have the language threshold to deal with. Mr. Within is that person saying in 2019, oh dear culture of the world, you know, cultures of the world. Eventually, we cannot avoid that the expansion and the curiosity, nations should not be treated as nations. The borders of like the borders of a country are not like walls. You know, it's as if we should see nations as members of a tribe. Okay? And the members of the tribe are constantly deciding how the tribe functions. These members of the tribe see that if they just want to each hold their individual position, as if these people, let's say before they become a tribe, every person wants to do their own thing. But suddenly when they speak to one another, they get access to each other's data. So the value of civilization is collective data processing, which really includes the new things entering the system and many things that are leaving the system. You know, it's not just people that die. Ideologies come into conscious attention of people, and eventually those ideologies fade. It's as if, for me, the reason um, perhaps I find that I indirectly give these talks is simply because these talks open moments for me where I try to, with a hammer as you know, well designed as Thor's, try to break my own ideology. The reason is, let me tell you this, the honest thing. Every day the person wakes up, there is a novelty factor. There is something new that happens. This novelty factor of the day is really where your mind grows. I mean, think about it, right? People go to the gym. What are they doing? They're pretty much tearing up their muscle fibers and then taking in a lot of protein and just waiting to recover. You know, so it's like a breaking of something that was there in order to have it expand, right? And so if you change, if you, so in some sense, Mr. Within is suggesting now we need to take our, brains to, in some sense, the gym. We have to, like, with the same audacity that the caveman had, we have to now use ideas that are meaningless and to craft meaning. The whole point of life is objective data and subjective data through the animative force of your living intelligence are coming into motion. The data on its own has no meaning because you are moving in this world. Your motion is the kind of meaning of how the world comes across to you. And the whole thing about meditation, and pretty much, guys, this is something very deep in the core of these talks, is that I noticed something. I noticed these yogis are going to complete stillness, complete silence, and I was wondering why. Why are these people going there? Into these supreme states of renunciation. The concept of renunciation was chaotic for me because I'm like, how can you just let go of life so easily? And then I realized it's not letting go of life, it is letting go of how you saw life. And there's something liberating in that. And so I realized that they would go into moments of stillness and silence because, believe it or not, this is hilarious, but any human being, it's like, this is a kind of like, it just applies to all human beings. Any person who, if you throughout your busy day or whatever, just go into a park or somewhere where there's nature and sit, I recommend sit beside a tree. If there's a river, sit beside the river, you know. If there's a river accessible, sit beside somewhere where you see nature around you, right? And just go sit in some comfortable spot. And what it is you could be on a bench, it could be on the ground, it could be on a rock, it could be anywhere. And just sit still and silent for 10 minutes and then for 20 minutes if possible. In that 10 to 20 minutes, there's no meditation or instruction. In that 10-20 minutes, You're not meant to be a you're not because you're not meant to do anything, you're not meant to be anything. Just in that 10 to 20 minutes, be still and silent, and literally this is the true way that you should sit in meditation, is where you reach a point where gravity doesn't occupy your attention, you know. And so what that means is pretty much you, when you sit, it's as if you, as a conscious moment, you're just allowing your physical body to just be still, silent, and you watch the moment as it happens. In silence and stillness, not only your body breathes, but your mind begins to breathe, and there comes a sort of alignment. There comes a sort of acceptance of how the moment is just being what it is. And there's peace in that. There's a strange peace. It's as if like you were like, God, why are you why are you? It's like, that's, imagine this playful scenario. The man kind of had an audience with God, and the guy just shouts at the sky. He's like, God, why don't you help me? I'm your creation. Why don't you help me? You know, and God's like, yo, man, it's none of my business. Take care of your own business. You know? And so what I'm trying to say, it's a sort of situation where if we choose to submit the ego to the collective will, we will feel just like the same way as particles moving in empty space. Personalities moving by the divine will is the same thing as particles moving in empty space, you know? There's some people on this planet right now where these people are trying to fit into a hierarchical, you know, system. We value it as if, like, just like how the military has ranks, people in society have a different sort of social rank. Now, this social rank, um, once the species stops worshiping people, it will have to begin paying attention to how it's also worshiping ideas. And once the era of ideal worship breaks, that's in some sense something that my whole initiative and project on this planet is to, in some sense, see what has allowed language to, in some sense, cover our eyes. The educational system is totally the opposite. When something doesn't work, it's so easy to be innovative. Just see what the opposite is and wonder about the possibility. Um, there was a quote online I saw about Bill Gates, and evidently Bill Gates was, I believe, in the United Arab Emirates, in Dubai somewhere, and he went to give a huge talk there, or maybe in Kuwait, I'm not sure where. Bill Gates suddenly sees the room. There's a sort of segregation. It's as if women are on one side and there's a wall, and the men are on one side. And so at the end of Bill Gates' talk, evidently somebody asks a question. And he's like, Bill Gates, how can we make our economy advance? Some question like, towards that aim. Like it was a great question. Now, Bill Gates looks, at that religious divide. And in some sense, he says, you're when 50% of the population is not efficient, when 50% of the population are not allowed to work, in all fields, it's as if like you can't expect full efficiency. Sometimes it's like what you can do, you're not doing, you cannot expect like a greater answer. So what I'm trying to say is Bill Gates was like, you're dividing your society based on strict laws, and therefore its efficiency is not as high as it can be. And so this is why Mr. Within is kind of asking all nations, all nations, and pretty much I'm asking the whole planet, but I'm saying all people from all nations, wonder about your story of life, and then wonder about this science project called humanity. 4 billion years. Just take that in. And how are we living? Is it a costume game? I'm telling you, we are playing costume games in society. It is fake, excuse my language, but there's so much fake as fuck, things going on. That it's like, trust me, it's like, so society is a show, is a theater, is a performance. It's as if Machiavellian politics is a performance. War is a performance. If the problem cannot be solved internally, don't even look for an external solution to it. Because your internal position is so crucial to you. It's like you gotta like befriend your free will. You gotta wake up from the slumber of many eons of data. How would I say it? It's kind of crazy, right? It's as if you're born in this planet, but they tell you based on your atomic constant is like like how you're atomically made. It's as if you're made of star stuff, stardust. And so it's as if atomically we are ancient, but just the presence of consciousness through this atomic like design is the unique thing. And this is the challenge. It's always easier to destroy something than to create something. This is why it's always easier to see everything have no meaning. And this brings up the new paradigm of thought where human beings are going to be like, rather than me seeking a truth, I will build one. And what that means is that you look at the current world and you see what you can do and what you can't, and then you have to make a decision where your conscience and in some sense your desires are in some sense standing in the same room. In other words, your most ordered sense of self and your most chaotic sense of self are standing in front of you, you know. And so in that moment where your archetype of order and archetype of chaos are finding themselves in one moment, they are both bowing to the source of the attention, right? It's kind of funny. In front of our eyes, we're just a person going to work. Behind our eyes, we are the whole cosmos watching. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings and lights. And the greatest sort of awakening is the one where you were never asleep. Namaste.